My name is Rachel Carter. I'm 38 years old, and the last thing my husband whispered to me before our divorce hearing began was, "You'll leave here with nothing." He smiled when he said it, like the outcome had already been decided. His girlfriend laughed loud enough for the entire courtroom to hear and added, "She doesn't deserve a single dime." I didn't argue. I didn't even look at them. I just quietly reached into my briefcase, pulled out a sealed envelope, and handed it to my attorney with one simple request: give this to the judge when the time is right. 5 minutes later, the judge opened it, read 2 paragraphs, looked up, and said 4 words that changed everything. Well, this changes things, but to understand why you have to go back 15 years. I met Ethan when we were both 23. He had big dreams and very little money. I had a steady accounting job, a tiny apartment, and enough optimism for both of us. He wanted to start his own software company. Everyone around him said it was too risky. I didn't. I believed in him genuinely, completely, without hesitation. When we got married 2 years later, we agreed on a plan. I'd provide the stability while he built the business. Once it succeeded, we'd enjoy the rewards together. That was the dream anyway. The first 3 years were hard, really hard. Some months the company earned almost nothing. There were nights Ethan came home convinced he should quit. I'd sit beside him at our tiny kitchen table, pour him another cup of coffee, and remind him why he started. "We're going to get through this," I'd tell him, and somehow we always did. My paycheck covered the mortgage, the groceries, the utilities, the health insurance, even most of the company's early software expenses when investors backed out. I postponed graduate school because we couldn't afford both. I delayed buying a new car. I skipped vacations. Every single sacrifice felt worthwhile because I believed we were building something together, and whenever Ethan thanked me, he'd always say the same thing: "One day, all of this will be ours." I believed every word. Then everything changed. In the company's 7th year, one of Ethan's products unexpectedly took off. Within 18 months, the business had expanded across 3 states: interviews, awards, magazine covers, business conferences. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know Ethan Carter. At first, I was proud. Watching someone you love achieve their dream is a beautiful thing, until success started changing him. He stopped asking about my day. Dinner conversations became one-sided presentations about investors, revenue, and expansion plans. He hired assistants for work, but somehow still expected me to handle everything at home. When I mentioned finally going back to graduate school, he barely looked up from his phone. Why? The single word caught me off guard. "What do you mean? Why?" "I've always wanted to go," he shrugged. "Seems unnecessary now." Little by little, the partnership we'd built began disappearing. Business trips became more frequent. Late-night meetings became routine. Weekend plans were constantly canceled. Every concern I raised got dismissed the same way. "You're overthinking, you worry too much. It's just work." I wanted to believe him, until one evening. While organizing paperwork for our accountant, I found hotel reservations that didn't match a single conference on Ethan's calendar. I didn't accuse him. Not yet. I just quietly started paying attention. The signs became impossible to ignore. Phone calls taken outside, messages deleted the moment they arrived, sudden passwords on devices that had never needed them before. Then one afternoon, I overheard a conversation he thought I couldn't hear. "I'll handle the divorce soon," he said. "I just need everything positioned first." My entire world went silent, not because he wanted a divorce, because he'd apparently been planning one without saying a single word to me. That night, I didn't cry. I sat alone in our living room until sunrise, and then I made a decision. If our marriage had already ended in his mind, I wasn't going to beg him to stay. The next morning, I hired a divorce attorney. Her name was Linda Morales. After I laid everything on her desk, she leaned back in her chair and looked at me carefully. "Rachel, how much documentation do you have?" I opened a folder nearly 3 inches thick. Bank statements, tax returns, emails, loan records, receipts dating back more than a decade. She looked genuinely impressed. "You kept all of this?" I've always believed paperwork tells the truth. Over the following weeks, Ethan hired one of the most expensive legal teams in the city. Mutual friends started calling me. Apparently, he'd been telling everyone exactly how the divorce would end. He says you'll never touch a penny of his company. He keeps saying he built everything himself. I thanked people for letting me know. I never argued, never defended myself. The truth didn't need me to shout it. The morning of the hearing, Linda adjusted the stack of files on our table. "Are you ready?" I looked toward the courtroom doors. "I'm done fighting." Then I smiled. "I'm ready for the truth." Just then, Ethan walked in wearing an expensive tailored suit. Behind him came his attorney, and seated comfortably in the gallery was the woman I'd recognized from those hotel reservations. She caught my eye and smiled. Then Ethan leaned close and whispered, "You should have settled when I offered." I said nothing. The courtroom doors opened. Everyone stood. As the judge took his seat, I reached into my briefcase, removed the carefully sealed envelope, and quietly handed it to Linda. "Please," I whispered, "give this to the judge when the time is right." The proceedings began. Ethan leaned back in his chair with the confidence of someone who believed the outcome had already been decided. He didn't even look nervous. Why would he? He thought the company, the investments, and the future we'd built together belonged entirely to him. His attorney stood first. Your Honor, Mr. Carter built his business through his own vision, leadership, and hard work. While Mrs. Carter was certainly his spouse, she made no meaningful contribution to the creation or growth of the company. We ask the court to recognize the business as his separate achievement. Ethan nodded proudly. Then he glanced at me. With that same smile he'd worn years ago the morning he promised we'd build our future together. Only now it carried no warmth at all. The judge turned toward Linda, Mrs. Carter's response. Linda stood calmly. We'll address those statements, Your Honor. She didn't argue. She didn't accuse anyone of lying. She simply walked to the clerk's desk and handed over the sealed envelope. This was prepared by my client. The judge adjusted his glasses. What exactly is it? A chronological summary of documented financial support, with records already included in discovery. I'll review it. He opened the envelope carefully. The entire courtroom watched in silence. Ethan crossed his arms. His girlfriend glanced toward me with an amused expression. Neither of them looked the least bit concerned. The judge began reading. His eyes moved slowly down the first page, then the second. He stopped, went back, read one paragraph again. Finally, he looked up. Mrs. Carter? Yes, Your Honor. You organized these records yourself? I did. He nodded thoughtfully. I appreciate a clear timeline. Then he returned to the letter. The first page wasn't emotional. There were no accusations, no dramatic language, only dates. March 2011, Rachel withdrew $28,000 from personal savings to cover company payroll after investor funding was delayed. Supporting documents attached. September 2012, Rachel refinanced her vehicle to reduce monthly expenses, allowing additional household income to support business operations. Supporting bank statements attached. February 2013, Rachel postponed graduate school enrollment to continue working full-time while Ethan focused exclusively on company growth. Then came the emails. One in particular caught the judge's attention. It was from Ethan, sent during the company's third year. I couldn't have kept the company alive without you. Someday, everything we build will belong to both of us. The courtroom stayed completely silent. The judge continued reading. Thank you for covering the mortgage again. I promise this sacrifice won't be forgotten. Another one, every investor meeting is possible because you're keeping everything else together. I didn't look at Ethan. I didn't need to. The silence beside me was shifting. The confidence he had walked in with was quietly beginning to dissolve. The judge reached for the financial exhibits already submitted by both legal teams. He compared dates, bank records, loan documents, corporate filings. Every few moments, he made another handwritten note. Then he looked directly at Ethan. Mr. Carter. Yes, Your Honor. You testified that the business was entirely self-funded after its first year. That's correct. The judge lifted one document. Then could you explain this transfer? Ethan frowned. His attorney leaned forward immediately. What transfer? The $28,000 deposit made into the business operating account. His attorney quickly reviewed the exhibit and started to speak, then stopped. The judge continued calmly. It matches the exact amount withdrawn from Mrs. Carter's personal savings account on the same day. No one spoke. The judge turned another page. You also stated that household expenses were independently managed. Another document appeared. Yet these records indicate Mrs. Carter paid the mortgage, insurance, utilities, and healthcare premiums for nearly 4 consecutive years, while the business operated at a loss. Ethan shifted in his chair. His attorney whispered something into his ear. For the first time that morning, neither of them looked confident. The judge wasn't finished. There also appears to be correspondence directly acknowledging Mrs. Carter's financial contributions. He held up another printed email. This message specifically thanks her for keeping the company alive. The room was so quiet I could hear pages turning. The judge looked over the top of his glasses. Mr. Carter, were these statements accurate when you wrote them? Ethan hesitated. His attorney cut in immediately. Your Honor, we'd appreciate a brief recess. The judge raised one hand in a moment. He returned to the timeline one final time, placed it neatly on the bench, and looked directly at me. Mrs. Carter. Yes, Your Honor. He gently tapped the organized pages with his pen. This isn't an emotional argument. It's a factual one. Then he looked toward both attorneys, based on today's testimony and these supporting documents. The court is ordering additional financial review before any determination regarding asset division is made. Ethan's smile was completely gone. His girlfriend slowly lowered her eyes to the floor. The judge gathered the remaining documents and added one final sentence before adjourning. When the facts are presented this clearly, they deserve to be examined just as carefully. The courtroom reconvened 3 weeks later. During that time, a court-appointed financial review team examined everything: bank statements, tax returns, corporate records, loan agreements, email archives, all of it. I didn't spend those weeks celebrating. There was nothing to celebrate. A marriage had ended. No amount of paperwork could change that. When I walked back into the courtroom, Ethan looked different. The confidence he'd carried during the first hearing was gone. His suit was still perfectly tailored, but the certainty behind his eyes had disappeared entirely. The judge entered, reviewed the final report, and spoke without drama. The financial review confirms that Mrs. Carter made substantial documented contributions during the company's formative years. He turned a page. The evidence also confirms that several earlier statements regarding the source of funding and household financial responsibilities were incomplete. No one said a word. Accordingly, the marital assets will be divided based upon the verified financial record and applicable law. That was it. No dramatic speeches, no shouting, just the truth, finally allowed to stand on its own. The hearing ended less than 30 minutes later. As people began leaving the courtroom, Ethan remained seated. His attorney quietly gathered his files and stepped outside. Even the woman who had sat smiling behind him during the first hearing slipped out without saying a word. For the first time in years, it was just the two of us. He looked across the courtroom. Rachel, I stopped walking. I was wrong. His voice was quieter than I had ever heard it. I kept telling myself that once the company became successful, everything before that didn't matter anymore. He looked down at his hands, but it did. I didn't answer immediately. He continued, I convinced myself I built everything alone because it was easier than admitting how much I depended on you. His eyes finally met mine. I'm sorry. There was no anger left inside me, only acceptance. I didn't spend 15 years helping you because I wanted credit. He nodded. I know. I helped because I loved you. A silence settled between us. I never wanted this to become a battle. Neither did I, he admitted. I just wanted the truth. He closed his eyes for a moment. You deserve that. I wished him well not because he had earned forgiveness that morning, but because carrying bitterness any longer would only keep me tied to a life that was already over. A month later, the settlement was finalized. The outcome was fair, not extravagant, not symbolic, simply fair. For the first time in years, I wasn't building someone else's future. I was finally building my own. I didn't buy a bigger house. I didn't take a vacation. Instead, I invested in something I had postponed for nearly 15 years, my own consulting firm, a business dedicated to helping small family-owned companies organize their finances and grow responsibly. Ironically, the dream I had delayed while helping Ethan build his became the foundation of my next chapter. The first client who walked through my office door reminded me of us, years earlier, young, hopeful, trying to build something meaningful together. Only this time, I wasn't standing behind someone else's dream. I was standing inside my own. People sometimes ask whether I felt victorious after the divorce. The truth surprises them. I never wanted revenge. Revenge would have kept me looking backward. What I wanted was acknowledgement, not applause. Not sympathy, just the simple recognition that quiet sacrifices matter, even when they happen behind closed doors. The courtroom gave me that. But something even more important happened long before the judge ever read my letter. I stopped measuring my worth by someone else's appreciation. For years, I believed my value depended on whether the person beside me noticed everything I had done. I was wrong. My value had been there all along. The judge didn't create it. The documents didn't create it. The settlement didn't create it. They simply revealed what had always been true. And as I locked the door to my new office on my very first day in business, I smiled. Because the greatest thing I walked away with wasn't part of any settlement. It was the confidence to know that the strongest foundation I would ever build was the one beneath my own life.